Myers-Briggs explained. MBTI 101. What in the heck is Myers-Briggs? What do the 4 letters mean? What's the best way to type yourself? Do you have to take a test? We're going to be diving into all this and more, but before we get started, go ahead and smash that like button if you're excited to learn more about MBTI, and be sure and hit subscribe if you want more free videos around personal development, creativity, and intentional living. So grab your favorite beverage, get cozy, get comfy, and get ready to learn everything you want to know about MBTI. Super quick, super concise, super to the point. Are you ready? Let's go. So MBTI can be super useful in understanding yourself and others. It's a great tool for understanding where your strengths and challenges lie. It's a good way to look at tendencies and likelihoods of where you may tend to struggle, where certain types may tend to struggle. It's also good for relationships, any types of relationships, whether that be a romantic partner, parent-child relationship, co-worker, friends. It just gives so many good tools and resources for deepening understanding and improving relationships. You can even go much deeper with like getting to know yourself and looking at the 4 sides of the mind, because we don't just have an ego, we have these other parts of our mind that are more pushed down into the unconscious. Okay, MBTI 101. First of all, what do the 4 letters mean? I hear about the 16 types and they all like have these 4 letters. What do they mean? E versus I. This is extroverted versus introverted. Very simply put, we all do both. It's helpful to look at extroversion and introversion as more of a scale than an either or, more of like a spectrum. Introverted people tend to hang out on the side of the spectrum where we draw energy from solitude. Contrast that with extroverts, people who hang out on the extroverted side of the spectrum. They tend to gain energy from spending time with other people, from interacting with the outside world. N versus S, this is intuitive versus sensing. In a nutshell, this spectrum is our perceiving functions. Everyone does both. People who hang out on the intuitive side of the spectrum tend to gravitate more towards concept, big picture, underlying meaning, pattern recognition. Contrast that with the sensors who prefer more 5 senses type reality, like what actually is, like what is right in front of you. T versus F, these are our deciding functions, thinking versus feeling. Everybody does both. The T types tend to make decisions more based on thoughts. F types tend to make decisions more based on feeling. P versus J. This is the letter that I am least sold on. I feel like the concept of being a perceiver versus judger is a lot more complex than MBTI assigns meaning to. This quality is a lot messier in the more complicated type. MBTI technically classifies you as a P or a J based on your first extroverted cognitive function in your stack. It's basically how you interact with the world. The stereotypes go something like this. J's, who are judgers, tend to be more organized, more structured. P's, the perceivers, tend to be more carefree, more whimsical, maybe a bit chaotic. The problem I have with this is like INFJs and INTJs, for example, our hero function is introverted intuition. That is a perceiving function. So we can come across as very perceptive and very perceiving. We can come across as more carefree. MBTI gives us a J because our second function, our first extroverted function, is how we interact with the world. That brings us finally to the second way of typing, and that is using cognitive functions. I've already alluded to this in part 1. Basically, there are 8 cognitive functions. We will dive into these in detail in future videos, but for today, every type has an intuition, a sensing, a thinking, and a feeling function in their stack in a variety of preferential order. Each type uses one perceiving and one judging axis. Well, maybe it'll be more helpful if I just show you a little visual aid that I have here on my computer. Every type is a combination of one of the perceiving axes and one of the judging axes. Like I said, we'll dive into this more in another video. If someone is an extroverted thinker, they are automatically an introverted feeler. If someone is an extroverted intuitive, They're automatically an introverted sensor. This is just part of how cognitive theory works. Like I said, we'll dive into this more in detail in future videos. I just kind of wanted you to see what the 8 functions are, how they're tied together. It helps to be familiar with the cognitive functions. There is one other way to type someone, and I think it's the best way, and that is using temperaments and interaction styles. In short, there are basically 4 temperaments. There are the guardians, which are very driven by like duty and like doing the right thing. Artisans focus on the physical. This can come out in a variety of ways. It could be designing things to make them look beautiful. It could be their dress. They could be artists, and these tend to be more like the physical fine arts, like painting and sculpting. The idealists are the NF types. These are people that tend to focus more on people. They tend to be more interested in human behavior. Haha, I bet there's a good chance you're an NF if you're watching this right now. They're very into pattern recognition and taking those patterns to make sense of people. Then you have the rationals. They're the very smart yet out of the box type of thinkers. So you have those 4 temperaments, and you can kind of think about yourself or someone you're trying to type and which temperament you might fit. And then from there, you want to look at interaction styles, and that will help narrow down type from there. I like the type grid made by C.S. Joseph. I am going to actually take you into my screen and show you his type grid. I think it's so helpful. You see across the top, we have the guardians, the artisans, the intellectuals, and the idealists. Those are the 4 temperaments that I just talked about. So to see which type, you can see there are 4 types under each of the temperaments. If you know that you're an idealist, you might want to ask yourself, am I more structured? Am I more of a starter or a finisher type? Or do I prefer to work in the background? I like how he adds some adjectives over here to help you know what he means by that. So the structured types, they're very direct. They're very initiating. They will start things, and they operate from the perspective of control. The starter types are more informative than direct. They're maybe going to give you information in a way that is not very direct. It kind of beats around the bush a little bit more. They are initiators though, so they will start things. And they're very movement oriented. The finisher types, these are people who may have a hard time starting, but they love finishing things. They love refining. They are direct, but rather than being initiating, they're not going to go up to somebody necessarily and be direct. They prefer to respond to someone else. So for that reason, they are direct responding and movement oriented. We like to see progress and movement from A to B. And finally, the background types. These people are informative and responding. And they do operate from the perspective of control. He also included some adjectives for the different temperament types. You see those below. So the guardians he describes as more concrete, affiliative, which means they consider the perspective of the whole group, and more systematic. The artisans are more concrete, they're more pragmatic. He put some other definitions down here which are extremely helpful. And I see this little 4 sides of the mind section down here. We'll dive into that a little bit later. So are you still not clear on what type you are? My recommendation would be to use a combination of the last 2 methods that I mentioned, the cognitive functions and the temperament and interaction styles. Ponder the differences, strengths, challenges of all the types, and kind of just think about which type fits you or the person you're trying to type. This can look more like a process, and it will, especially if you're trying to type yourself, it will take having some internal self-awareness, and sometimes that just takes time. I hope that was helpful to you in explaining what MBTI is, what is Myers-Briggs, what do the 4 letters mean, what is all this lingo. Hopefully it gave you a good overview. We can dive into many other things in future videos. If you found this video useful, helpful, valuable, or if you learned something, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on personal development, creativity, and intentional living. Leave me a comment. I want to know, do you know your type, or have you narrowed it down? Do you still have questions about MBTI? I would love to hear. All right, that's it. That's it for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.